Everyone agrees it's a super important issue here, Kate, and I know you're pressing for all the right questions. Did the First Lady or her team, though, acknowledge this bizarre dichotomy, or maybe intentional dichotomy?
You know, they don't. The First Lady acknowledged it back in March when she said, I know I'm going to face criticism for tackling this topic. I'm going to do it anyway. Her office reiterated that to me yesterday as I pressed about the irony or the alleged hypocrisy about this. Certainly, she's going to move forward with it. She's aware of it. She hears the sort of cacophony in the background of critics questioning her topics. But this is something she's going to move forward with. She hasn't addressed the president and his tweets specifically. She has in the past on the campaign. She said, listen, I tell him all the time, he doesn't listen to me. He's an adult. He's going to do what he's going to do as she moves forward. And she's headed to Africa in October. Again, another part of the world that the president has criticized in the past.
Exactly. People wondering if that is his own form of trolling. Kate Bennett, great to have you with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, John, we have got to get to this very dramatic and harrowing video.
I'm Poppy Harlow in New York. So glad you're with me this Tuesday. This morning, we are learning about new attacks from Russian hackers on this country just months before the midterm elections. Overnight, Microsoft announced it had thwarted a group of cyber attackers linked to the Kremlin. The tech giant says it detected and seized 6 websites that were set up as a trap to lure in users and then steal their sensitive information. This is the same group of hackers who targeted the DNC in 2016 in the midst of the election. This time it targeted the Senate and conservative think tanks with prominent Republican lawmakers in their ranks, also tying together all of the targets of this attack. They have all either broken with President Trump or are pushing continued sanctions on Russia. So far, no reaction on this from the president this morning. He's reacting to a lot else. He is reacting to the blue wave, security clearances, President Obama, and talking about the border. But let's get back to the main story this morning, and that is that hack overnight. Our senior international correspondent, Alex Marquardt, joins me now. This is huge. This is another attack on the integrity of our democracy, on our elections. How did it happen, and how did Microsoft find it?
Well, Microsoft says overnight that they had detected last week these 6 different internet domains or websites that were attempted spear phishing attacks. And spear phishing attacks are essentially a way to get users to give up important information like email passwords and the like. And when you dig down and look at the names of these fraudulent websites, what's really remarkable is that 2 names come to mind. And the first one is this website was made to look like it belonged to the Hudson Institute. The second was made to look like it was part of the International Republican Institute. Now, Poppy, as you mentioned, those are both prominent conservative think tanks. These are both think tanks that have parted with President Trump. They've criticized President Trump. And they have also leveled fierce accusations against Russian President Vladimir Putin. On the board of IRI, you have some of the most prominent anti-Putin critics like Senator John McCain, former National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, and Mitt Romney. And then when you look at the other names of these 6 different internet domains, 3 of them contain the word Senate. So it looked like these Russian hackers from the hacker group Fancy Bear, which is tied to Russian military intelligence. You may remember that name because they are the ones who are accused and were indicted for attacking and hacking into the DNC and the Clinton campaign. And it looked like they were going to try to go after members of the Senate or Senate offices, but Microsoft swooped in before they were able to. So it's unclear which senators they were attacking, but we have to remind our viewers that Senator Claire McCaskill of Missouri was also the target of an identical attack that was also found out by Microsoft. Microsoft, in this statement overnight, said that despite last week's steps, that's when they found those websites, we are concerned by the continued activity targeting these and other sites directed toward elected officials, politicians, political groups, and think tanks across the political spectrum in the United States. Taken together, this pattern mirrors the type of activity we saw prior to the 2016 election in the United States and the 2017 election in France, Poppy. So Microsoft really stepping up their game, helping out with election meddling, helping the federal agencies who really need all the help they can get ahead of these midterms and beyond.
I mean, thank goodness, right? Thank goodness they saw this and caught this. And Kremlin's denying any involvement, right?
Yeah, shocking, right? So the Kremlin came out this morning saying that they really didn't know anything. They don't know anything about this. And I want to read a pretty remarkable statement. They say, in part, from the U.S., we hear that there was not any meddling in this elections. Whom exactly are they talking about? What is the proof? And on what grounds are they reaching such conclusions? So, Poppy, not only are they denying that they know anything about the hacking, but listen to that line. From the U.S., we hear that there was not any meddling in the elections. Where did they get that impression? Everybody at the highest levels of government in this country, except for the President of the United States, has said that there's no doubt that it's the Russians who meddled in 2016 and who continue to meddle now. Poppy?
And that's the danger in the president standing on the world stage, literally next to Putin, right? And questioning that, even if there is a walk back later. Alex, great reporting. Thank you. Let's talk about all of this. Our national security analyst and former attorney for the National Security Agency, Susan Hennessy, is here with me this morning. Susan, the fact that this is an attack on very clearly high-level Republicans who have broken with the president. The head of Microsoft says this is an uptick that we're seeing in attacks and says this shows that there is a broadening of the types of groups that Russia is targeting here. What do you make overall on this attack and who was targeted?
Yes, so look, this was never about Republicans or Democrats. And in fact, Republicans were targeted during the 2016 election, including some of President Trump's primary opponents. You know, I think this really does speak to, Trump's own administration has been really raising the alarms, talking about the lights blinking red. DNI Director Coates, CIA Director Pompeo, while he was in office, the only person that appears to not understand that this is an ongoing and incredibly serious threat, is the president himself.
Because he sees it tied to his win, right? I mean, he cannot seem to see the two apart. And so this morning, a series of tweets from him, but none of them condemning this. You know, I was reminded instantly reading this morning, Susan, of Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio, Republican, running for president in 2016, warned when the John Podesta emails were coming out through WikiLeaks from that DNC hack from this same group, quote, "I want to warn my fellow Republicans who may want to capitalize politically on these leaks. Today it's the Democrats, tomorrow it could be us." So what should the president say?
Well, I think this is another example of Donald Trump being unable to sort of separate his personal interest, his own ego, from the best interests of the United States. You know, that statement from Marco Rubio, note that he was a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee at the time, that is the kind of statement that we would expect to hear from any president, a president of either party. And that's to say, look, maybe this benefits me in this small moment, but this is about a larger principle. This is not about attack on Republicans or Democrats. This isn't about an attack on democracy. I think that is why we've seen such a unified response, really a really remarkable bipartisan response in a really fractured political time, and it is just another example of the president sort of not being able essentially to put the country before himself.
Do you think that these continued attacks, tied right to the Kremlin, by the way, indicate that Vladimir Putin does not believe that, or does see a weakness, rather, in U.S. intelligence agencies and in terms of being able to stop this?
So I don't know that it's U.S. intelligence agencies or the president himself. Look, there are two ways that you can sort of deter this type of conduct. One is deterrence by denial. You essentially make it impossible for the adversary to succeed, sort of strong cybersecurity practices. We saw that 30-minute NSC meeting, a president who is not taking this particularly seriously on that front. The other way is sort of traditional deterrence. You impose a cost such that your adversary says, maybe this isn't such a good idea. You have to ask yourself, if you're sitting in Vladimir Putin's shoes, a rational actor by all accounts, and you're listening to the words and looking at the actions of President Trump, are you telling yourself that after the enormous payoff that you got in the 2016 election, that this is something that isn't going to be worth it? Or are you looking at Trump and saying, this is the guy who's sort of giving me the wink and essentially giving me the green light?
All right, Susan, stay with me. I want to jump over to the White House, and I'll be right back with you, because the president is insisting in a new interview that he could run the Mueller probe, the Russia investigation, if he wanted to. That's what he told Reuters. Let's go to Abby Phillips. She joins me this morning from the White House. So good morning, Abby. This is a president who's changed his tune. I mean, for months and months, he's been saying, look, I want to sit down with Mueller and his team for an interview. It's just my lawyers. They won't let me. They're figuring it out. But now, in a number of ways, he's really echoing his legal team.
Yeah, Poppy, the change of tune from President Trump, the attacks on the special counsel that seems to have escalated in their tone over the weekend really points to a sense of growing anxiety from the president about where this probe is all headed. Poppy, just take a look at how often, just this month alone, President Trump has attacked the special counsel in tweets 67 times just this month. And now in this interview with Reuters, the president is saying something a little different than we've heard before. He's saying this idea of a perjury trap is real. He says that he believes perhaps that because what he claims Comey is best friends with Mueller, that Mueller might believe Comey over him, prompting him to get into some trouble. But he also says this about the probe, indicating that he still believes that he has the ability to exert control over it. He says, I can go in, I can do whatever, if I could run it if I want, but I decided to stay out. I'm totally allowed to be involved if I wanted to be. So far, I've chosen to be involved. I haven't chosen to be involved. I'll stay out. He's leaving the door open, but he's saying so far he's left it to the probe itself. But he also added about the Mueller probe that he believes that the Mueller probe is actually playing into the hands of Russians. He says, Mueller's probe played right into the hands of Russians. If it was Russia, they played right into Russia's hands. Now, earlier in the program, you were just talking to Alex